See if I turn that on. Yeah, there it is. All right. Few housekeeping clipboardy things before we get started. Last week we started a teen Bible class, teen Bible study at mine and Dana's house, and it went really well. A lot of people came, and we talked about how we wanted to go from then on out. And so what we settled on is the official time will be tomorrow from 5 to 6, if they want to come to that. Parents are, of course, always welcome. It'll be something that we may tweak, but that seemed to be sort of the consensus of when the most people could participate at this time. That end time isn't a super hard end time, but we wanted to be able, because of other activities, be able to say the study part will be done at that point. So that'll be from 5 to 6 tomorrow. There will be food. Bring Bibles so we can study them. Also, this Friday is our holiday season kickoff barn party at the Beams house. That's going to be from 5 to 9. We're going to do a number of things. One of them is going to be the gift exchange, so bring something wrapped but unmarked. Don't spend any more than $10 on that. If you want to be creative with that rule, find ways around it, go for it. Because when we get together, we like to eat things, and because so far on the online sign-up list, Benton is providing a dessert for all of us to split between us. I'm going to pass that list around too. I'll go ahead and add, if you sign up here, I'll go ahead and add it to the online version. And also, when I was a younger man and I was in youth ministry, I used to set up for events all by myself all the time because I thought that was a good, efficient way to do it. A hernia surgery later, I discovered it was not a good way to do it. So I would like some help setting up and cleaning up for the party this Friday. If you could help in the afternoon to set up, there's some places for people to sign up for that. And if you could help just clean up when it's done, get chairs and tables and stuff back here, that would be helpful. But I would like to know that you're going to do that. So I'm going to pass that around. And you guys make sure that lands somewhere that I can find it. Also, we find that it's helpful that when we have children in the nursery, there are adults to watch them. So if you would like to be one of those adults to watch them, sign up on this list. And I'd also like to do a quick reminder about our winter backpack drive. We're putting together some backpacks. The kids are going to be very involved in this. We're putting together some backpacks to be able to give out to sort of homeless, unhoused neighbors in the community that will help them through the winter months. There is a list of the things we're looking for. A few things have actually been marked off of that list because people have generously donated all we needed in that category, so we tried to indicate that. I noticed there were some donations out in the basket, so thank you for doing that. We hope that you'll continue to do that because I think that's a very good thing. And also I want to remind you that we're accepting donations of your old gift wrapping supplies. Now, you want to go buy new ones, great. But when we do a play date during winter break, we decided that it would be good if we had like a gift wrapping station. It's very hard when you've got little kids to find time to do all that. So we wanted to have that set up in a side room so the kids wouldn't see you get the gift out to wrap it. It'll be in a side room. You can do that, but we are looking for donations of supplies. There's a basket out in the foyer for that as well. It's November, if you're keeping up, and that means we're closing in on Thanksgiving. Now, I'll say regularly, I have, for the last several years on and off, I've done a series on gratitude leading into Thanksgiving. It's helpful to me that we have things on the calendar that reinforce things like that. I know Thanksgiving is a completely made-up holiday. I'm totally cool with it. I also think, in my experience with human beings and being a human being, we could use reminders to be grateful. And there are a lot of good reasons for that, and having something on the calendar every year that does that is a good thing. and being intentional about how we engage with that is also a good thing. I actually haven't done this kind of series in about 2 years, so I figured it would be a good time to come back to it. So for the next 3 weeks, we are going to be talking about gratitude from 3 different angles, and we're going to have some sort of a sort of challenge that goes through it that I'll explain as we get a little bit further into it. But the idea is that when we get to that point where we're having a feast, and no, it's not a mandated by the Bible feast, but when we're having a feast together and is in some ways focusing on being grateful, the people who follow Jesus should be the people who can be the most grateful and take the most advantage of that. And so this is about kind of preparing ourselves for that, and also preparing ourselves to just live as grateful people because it's a better way to live. So, if you want to follow along in the YouVersion Bible app, you can do that. Open that app, go to Events, pick North Augusta Church. Those are our notes. Turn, if you will, to Colossians chapter 3, and we're going to start in verse 12. Colossians chapter 3, we're going to start in verse 12. To the Colossian church. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Now, this is set up for what he's about to say. But he says, therefore, as God's chosen people, meaning since you are God's chosen people, meaning you being God's chosen people is the context that's going to make what I'm about to tell you make sense, is the reason, the rationale for why you would be doing the things that I'm about to tell you. So what does he tell them? He says, number one, as God's chosen people, let me characterize that, who are both holy and dearly loved. He's not saying, I'm giving you a list of things, and if you do these things, then you will be considered holy, and then you will be considered dearly loved. That will make God love you. That's not what it says. It says, since you are God's people who are holy and who are dearly loved, let us clothe ourselves with, and then he starts listing some virtues, but I want you to notice the nature of the virtues that he lists. Because I think if we're not careful, what we think that they're going to list in times like this, when they say, okay, as God's people, here's what you should be doing, that they're going to do a lot of stuff about personal piety, about keeping your own sort of moral behavior right. And I'm not saying that's unimportant. I'm just saying it's not usually what they say. What kinds of things does he say? Clothe yourself with compassion. Much like I point out when we look at the fruit of the Spirit, I'm going to go ahead and show the card now. I want you to notice how relational every term is. Clothe yourselves with compassion. Compassion has to do with how you relate to other people. Yes, there's a point to be made about being compassionate with yourself. It's based off the concept of being compassionate to other people. You understand? So clothe yourselves with compassion. Okay, what else? Kindness. They're sort of overlapping themes. Kindness has to do with how you behave towards other people. Humility. You might say, see, that one is personal. Well, yeah, it kind of is, but also it only really matters in context of relationships. Gentleness and patience. Gentleness with other people. Patience, you've met other people, right? You've been other people? Yeah. We all require patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. What does bear with each other imply? Well, that sometimes the with each other is going to take a bit of effort. Sometimes people go through hard things and it's not the most comfortable thing to be around. Sometimes people you love make choices you wouldn't make and are just difficult people. And if we're going to be in relationship with each other, there are times where I'm going to have to bear with you and there are times where you're going to have to bear with me. Right? If we're going, let me rephrase. If we're going to continue to be in relationship with each other, there's going to have to be times where we bear with one another, right? And if you don't know that, make a note because it's going to come up. And forgive each other. And I love when the New Testament tells you to forgive each other because it always like anticipates the exceptions you're going to make in your head. So since you're God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved. You're going to need to bear with one another. You're going to need to forgive one another. And now check what he says. Well, here's the conditions. Here's the conditions, because we're always looking for, okay, I don't want to be wasteful with forgiveness. It takes a lot of effort. So give me the conditions under which I would need to forgive people. Okay, here's the conditions. If you have a grievance against someone, forgive them. So let me translate. If someone has done something that they need to be forgiven for, you should forgive them. Okay, and since he anticipates that we're still leaving wiggle room in our head, he throws the next one on. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Real quick, Theology 101 refresher. Were you forgiven by God because you deserved it? No, we talk about grace. Grace, mercy, forgiveness. So look at that, and it's a play on even the same thing that Jesus said in the Lord's Prayer when he says, God, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And then after the prayer is over, he immediately says, for if you forgive men their sins when they sin against you, your Father in heaven will forgive your sins. But if you do not forgive men their sins when they sin against you, your Father will not forgive your sins. Don't take my word for it. You can look that up. So forgive which people? The ones you have a grievance against. Are you sure I should forgive them? Well, look at the way that the Lord forgave you, and as long as it's not above what God did, then sure. Just take it up to the level of God's forgiveness, and if you go, don't go past that. I think most of us are going to be working on that pretty much the whole time, right? And then he says, and over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Again, relational. When you are called to follow God, when you choose to follow the way of Jesus, you need to understand that most of the descriptors that come off of that have to do with your relationships with other people. But I think we can be honest and look at that list and say, wait a minute, okay, those are all good things, but they're also very difficult things. Right? Not all the time, but with most of us some of the time. It's a tall order. Matter of fact, I think we can go so far as to say, I don't think I'll get a lot of debate on this, that if you look at that list, you would say, yes, those are virtues. Yes, those are things to aspire to, but they're not things that most of us just come by naturally with everyone. Right? So it's a good thing he wasn't done talking. Because I think the next part is the part that enables this part. Keep going. Pick up in verse 15. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. Since as members of one body you are called to peace, and be thankful. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms and hymns and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Now, quick question. Paul's written a lot of these letters. He's educated as a lawyer. He's very good communicator. He's a good writer. Do you think that he forgot that he had already told them to be thankful? I mean, seriously, that's a paragraph. How many times does he talk, in that number of sentences, how many times does he remind them to be grateful or thankful? Do you think that's accidental? Do you think that he was just forgetful? Do you think he was like, I got to remember to tell him to be grateful, and then he just forgot that he did it twice? In the span of that paragraph, no less than 3 times, it almost seems shoehorned at times. No less than 3 times he tells them, be grateful, be thankful, giving thanks. So walk through it. He says, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, not just be peaceful. Let the specific peace of Christ rule in your hearts. He uses that to remind us that we were called to peace. And then he goes in and says, and be thankful. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another, songs and hymns and spiritual songs with gratitude in your hearts. And whatever you say or do, do it all in the name of the Lord. We quote that one, but sometimes we leave the last part off. giving thanks to God through him. I'm going to argue that he didn't forget, and he's not trying to meet some kind of word count, so just throwing extra phrases in. I'm going to argue that he thinks, by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, that gratitude is the thread that weaves through all of this, and gratitude is the thing that makes all of this possible. I'm going to argue that we cannot do what he describes here without it being permeated by gratitude. And that's not just a thought that you have every once in a while. It's not like, okay, you convinced me, I'm going to remember to be grateful. We're going to talk about this more in a bit, but the Bible doesn't really indicate that that's the way that works, and there's been actually a body of research that's sprung up in the last few years that demonstrates that's not the case with human beings in gratitude. You don't just go, oh yeah, you talked me into it, now I'll be more grateful. I almost said more gratitude. Now I'll be more grateful. It's not the way we work. Matter of fact, I'll talk about this more in a minute, but I'll go ahead and hint at it because it's something we're about to do. The research says that in order to cultivate gratitude, human beings have to engage in repeated tangible practices to make that change in ourselves. And we all think we're the exception to it. But it's not what the Bible indicates, and it's not what the science says. It says that it takes tangible practices. So, we'll go ahead and start with one now. And Brad, I'm going to ask you to help me. I'm going to give you half of these and a box of pens and go around to one side. I'll go around to the other side. See, everybody gets one. You can just pass and pull. And while that's going around, and I'll walk you through that exercise, you don't have to get into it just yet, but while that's going around, I am going to, let's see, how am I going to do this? I'm going to say, Mary Murphy, give me the name of somebody in the room, and I won't tell you why. Just give me the name of an adult or teenager in the room. Right, I'm not going to make them get up and wrestle a chicken or anything, just... Okay. Ben, I would like to give you a gift of the Little Book of Gratitude by Robert Emmons. It's where it's where this exercise is coming from. It's an excellent resource. It's very affordable, but it walks you through a lot of the research that we're actually going to deal with. And we'll talk about him in that book in just a minute. But first, let's walk through this exercise. Let me see when everybody gets one. You should have a pen. Pens are new, so you may have to scribble in the corner for a second. Okay, I think everybody's got one now. Now, here's what we're going to do. This is extremely simple, and I don't want you to overthink it, but I want you to know that most of the exercises that we're talking about are going to be things that are this simple. They don't all look exactly like this, but they're this simple. But this morning, I just want you to walk through this thought process. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, too, I don't think, if you want to keep this and go back and look at it later, great, that would be a fine thing to do, but from most of the research I've read, it's really the fact that you take this moment to sit down and intentionally think about it, intentionally denote this thing that you're grateful for and this thought process about it. That's way, way more important than you ever going back to look at it. Can if you want to, but taking the time to actually do the practice is the thing that matters. So, walk through this. It should be pretty self-explanatory, but I'll walk you through it. I want you to think just for a second about something that you're grateful for, and we'll go ahead and talk about that with gratitude. It's not just, yay, I like that good things happen to me. Gratitude always denotes a giver. It always denotes another person or God or somebody who has done something that they did not have to do that was beneficial to me. So I want you to think of something that you're grateful for and who's kind of responsible for it, and we'll walk through this. So your sheet should say, recently I felt glad when blank, and in that blank I want you to name or describe the person who was involved in what you're thinking about. Okay? You can put their name, or if it's not something that you want, to accidentally leave your paper in somebody to see, then just describe them in a way that just you would know. But make some notation so you know who you're talking about. Recently, I felt glad when blank, the name of the person that you're thinking about, next blank, took the time or made the effort to, and then just say what they did. First thing that pops in your mind, don't overthink it. I felt grateful when this person took the time or made the effort to, and briefly write down what they did. Next blank. I know that this person could have, and then, speculate, but any of 100 other things that they could have done instead of the thing they did for you. But fortunate for me, this person chose to, and then again, just briefly describe what they did, just reference back to it. You don't have to fully write it out again. So recently I felt glad when this person took the time or made the effort to do this thing. I know that they could have done 100 other things, but fortunate for me, this person chose to, and reference back to what they said, what they did. Now, next blank says, this action, and in the blank that follows that, I want you to describe how it affected you practically, okay? You understand what I mean by practically? I want you to, not how it made you feel, I want you to tell me how this thing practically helped you, practically brought good into your life, practically made things better. Now, I'll grant you that the way it might have done good for you has made you feel better, and I'll allow that, but you'll get to describe it in a minute. This action, how it affected you practically, and then the next blank is, and made me feel, and then you write how it made you feel. Good thing you have me here to explain these things to you. And then I want you to just finish it off by saying thank you and identify the person again. Put their name, describe them, whatever you want to do. That's it. I'm not saying this is what you should do every day. I'm not saying this is the only practice, but I'm saying it matters. It matters in terms of who you're becoming. It matters in terms of your spiritual formation. It matters in terms of you becoming a more grateful person that you took the time, and what was that, 3 minutes? You took the time to sit down and think about it. It's something that already happened. The person already did it. You're not making it happen. But the fact that you take the time to stop, to notice, and to process this good that came into your life because of the action of somebody else that they did not have to choose. That could be another person you know. It could be God. But gratitude always works like that. Acknowledgement of whatever the thing is, but also of the giver or givers. And it can't be gratitude with less than that. Just yay for good stuff is not gratitude. Now, I ran across, it's been several years ago, but honestly the way that I bumped into this stuff is I wanted to do a Thanksgiving series, and so I did some Google searches on stuff about gratitude. And I ran across this guy named Robert Emmons. He also goes by Bob Emmons if you're looking for him on Facebook. He calls himself Bob. And his stuff was really fascinating to me, and it was more fascinating when I found out that the reason, if you do any research on the science of gratitude, you're going to find his name very quickly because he developed the field. He is a psychology professor at USC Berkeley, and he got asked to be a part of this conference, and in the conference all these experts were supposed to come in, and each of them was supposed to take one of the human virtues, and they were supposed to present the psychological research on the human virtue. And he said, and I chose gratitude because I piddled around and I called late and it was the only one that was left. And so he went to look for the research and it didn't exist. There was no research. There was like one study from the 30s, I think, that sort of tangentially mentioned it. But that was it. There was no research. And so Emmons decided that he needed to do the research. And so he started, and what he found was absolutely fascinating. And it's one of those cool stories where he kind of, going into this, was sort of at least functionally agnostic at that point. He said he wasn't really practicing his faith or anything, and through his study of gratitude, came back to it and believes in it more strongly now than he ever did. But anyway, when I looked through his research and I thought about how we could apply it to our church and the good things that it could do there, I actually, on a whim, sent him an email and reached out to him, and we had some correspondence back and forth about it. And I got to pick his brain. And he said, in the recent past, wait, that was the instructions. I'm in the right place. I sent him an email and told him that I wanted to do it with the church and asked him if he knew of any other churches that had done it. Interestingly enough, he goes to a fairly large church. He had done a Sunday school class on this material, but he did not know of any other churches that had done it as a church. It was a challenge for the whole church. And so as we were going back and forth to it, he was thinking about it. And he did tell me this. He did say, concerning practicing gratitude, that he had, since the research had been out, he had rethought some of it, or at least had a new insight. Not really rethought, but he had a new insight. And the insight was this: when you present all the stuff that we're going to present to you about science and the benefits of the gratitude, for some reason, maybe it's just human nature, maybe it's our Western mentality or whatever, we can start to say, well, yeah, I would like that good stuff to happen in my life, so I need to tell me how to do the gratitude stuff so I can make that stuff happen. And when you enter into it in that sort of mercenary consumer mindset, it doesn't quite work. You understand what I'm saying? If you go in with that mindset, doing the same things doesn't tend to produce the same thing. He said, and this should be up on the screen, he said, I used to think that growing in gratitude required going out and getting something that I didn't have. And then I realized that it involves simply living in the reality that has been there all along, the many ways in which my life is supported and sustained by others. And then he told me, this may be the most important message that you communicate to your church about trying to become more grateful. Don't focus on yourself. It seems counterintuitive, but it works. And that's part of why I really want to emphasize this idea that gratitude involves the acknowledgement of the giver. And if it doesn't involve the acknowledgement of the giver, it's not gratitude. It's just you being happy about stuff you like. You have to acknowledge givers. And that can be human givers, it can be God, it can be both. But it has to involve that acknowledgement. It flies in the face of all of our pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps mentality, but frankly, that mentality doesn't do us a lot of favors. And we'll talk about this more in subsequent weeks, but one of the findings from the research is that it's impossible. Listen to me. It is impossible to feel both entitled and grateful at the same time. If you feel entitled to something, it is impossible for you to feel grateful for it. Psychologically, you can't do it. And as people who follow this God, who believe that all good gifts are blessings that come down from Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows, when we live with this assumption that God is doing good, that God is benevolent, then we shouldn't have trouble finding at least one God to thank. And that should help us see all of the people in our lives who are choosing good they don't have to choose. Let me give you some of the findings of the research. Dr. Emmons says, numerous psychological, physical, and social benefits are associated with gratitude. A host of recent studies have examined its effects on health and well-being, and these clinical trials, laboratory experiments, and large-scale surveys have revealed that the practice of gratitude has dramatic, lasting, and positive results. Now listen to this and think of any time that you've heard a scientist say this kind of thing. Results in lasting and positive results every time. For example, keeping a gratitude diary of 2 weeks produced sustained reductions in perceived stress by 28%, if you want to be specific, and depression, 16% on that one, in healthcare practitioners. So in the subset of healthcare practitioners in that very high stress career, just keeping a gratitude diary for 2 weeks reduced perceived stress by 28%, depression by 16% in healthcare workers. The research says gratitude is related to 23% lower levels of stress hormones, and if you want to be specific, the hormone cortisol. When you're under stress, when you're having anxiety, your body produces this hormone called cortisol. People who are regularly practicing gratitude, that hormone, the presence of that hormone was reduced by 23%. Dietary fat intake is reduced by as much as 25% when people keep a gratitude journal. Writing a letter of gratitude. You understand what I'm saying here? The difference between this and a diary? Writing a letter of gratitude to a specific person. And we can talk about specifics of that later. But writing a letter of gratitude reduced feelings of hopelessness in 88% of suicidal inpatients and increased levels of optimism in 94% of them. So your group that they're taking this from is people who are suicidal and suicidal to the level that they are inpatient. They're receiving inpatient treatment. And for them to practice gratitude, to write a letter of gratitude, let me be clear about that. They went through a process over 3 weeks where they wrote letters of gratitude every day. That's not what it says. They wrote a letter of gratitude. And 88% of them reported reduced feelings of hopelessness, and 94% of them reported increased levels of optimism. Gratitude is related to a 10% improvement in sleep quality in patients with chronic pain, 76% of whom had insomnia, and 19% lower depression levels. So your group here is people who are experiencing chronic pain. You've known people who experience chronic pain and how it affects them. Practicing gratitude, doing tangible gratitude practices, improve their sleep quality by 10%. Again, that's people with chronic pain. It improved their sleep quality by 10%, and 19% lower depression levels. But this takes tangible practices. It will not ever be a matter of you saying, okay, I get it. Gratitude's important. I'll try to be more grateful. That's not going to work. You're going to have to actually do things, and do things that don't necessarily come naturally to you. This is how these kind of things work. So I've thought about, I used to print out, I told you Dr. Edmonds had done something for his Sunday school class. He had sent me what he had done. I modified it for us and had a whole workbook that I passed out. And that was great. That worked really well for some people. Frankly, if you want a copy of that, I'd be happy to provide it for you if you just ask me. But I tried to make it more manageable, something that you could do even more easily with your kids or something. And here's what I came up with. I came up with gratitude bingo. Now, the concept behind the challenge that we're doing is this. If you study psychology and sociology, one of the things that you'll find, and Emmons actually pushes this in his work too, is that if you want to form a new habit, it takes about 21 days of doing something for it to become a habit. 21 days. I don't have to take my word for it. You can look it up, but it's about 21 days, so about 3 weeks. And so the idea was that if I can get us to practice gratitude for 21 days, then that's going to become a lot more natural part of our lives. Make sense? And so I came up with gratitude bingo. So every week, I'll give you a new one of these. What I want you to do is I either want you to tape it to your bathroom mirror, put it up on your refrigerator, whatever you're going to see it. And in each of these squares, is that there? Go ahead and go to the next one, Dave. In each of the squares, there is a gratitude activity. Some of them repeat. And your job, instead of me telling you on Mondays you're going to do this one, You do the one that you decide. It's kind of like the giving thing. You decide in your heart what you want to do, and then you do it. Now, the bingo part is this, and it's just for fun, and it doesn't really count for anything, but what I'd like for you to try to do is over the course of the week, try to get bingo. By the end of the week, try to get bingo, just in a row in any direction. Is there a prize? No. Except for the knowledge that you're becoming more grateful. There's a free space in the middle. It says, it's grace, be grateful for it. So there's a gratitude exercise for you. And you can mark these off. So I'm going to pass these around, and they're for you to take home. I also will post it online if you lose yours or a kid eats it or something. You can print out another one. And we'll send reminders through the week and that kind of thing. But there are different things to do. So let me give you some examples. So sometimes it's as simple as, there's one called 3 Blessings. Sometimes it's as simple as write down 3 good things that happened to you for which you are not responsible. And that's it. By the way, that's part of it. When you hear him say gratitude diary or gratitude journal, you're probably thinking about filling up notebooks with long, look, that's not what he's talking about. If you want to do that and that's the way you roll, go for it. But actually what he says, he calls it gratitude light, and it literally is writing down like a couple of things 2 or 3 times a week, like a couple of sentences about what you're grateful for 2 or 3 times a week. That's what he calls a gratitude journal. It's not you writing big flowery prose. It's you taking the time to pay attention and to note it. It can be as simple as write down 3 things that you're grateful for that happened to you for which you're not responsible. A great one that we did for years and years and years and still do is I call it the grateful table. When you sit down for dinner at night, which is a good thing for you to do, everybody goes around the room and shares at least one thing they're grateful for that happened that day. Specific things. And here's a side note of that. It's cool for that to become a practice that becomes a part of what your family is and what they think they do when they're together. But one of the things that we noticed as we started to do it is that when you know you're going to sit down with your family at night and you're going to have something to say, you start looking for it. You wake up in the morning, you go through your life, and you're looking for the things to be grateful for. And the thing that I have found to be true in my life is this: what you look for, you will find. It's not that it'll make different things happen in your life. It means you'll notice the good things that you weren't even noticing. And the more that you do it, the more that you have eyes to see. We also noticed after a while that we had to start limiting everybody from the number of grateful things they said at the table because the food was getting cold. The longer you do it, the more stuff that people notice. Another one is never imagined. Basically what they call the negative way of gratitude. You basically take a few minutes to imagine what your life would be like without some good thing that's in it that you're grateful for. And it actually does a good job of helping you be grateful for that thing. So you imagine the scenario how your life would be like if this thing wasn't in it, and it makes you appreciate the thing. Another one's called Thank You for Your Service. This one's simple. Make a point to thank a service worker, a cashier, a waitress for the way that they do their job, and use specifics. Because I'm going to tell you, I have worked as a cashier. I also have eyes and have noticed. People who do those kind of service jobs do not get a lot of thanks. And for you to take the time to notice them, and for it not to be just some pat on the back of good job cashiering, but to actually even notice some specific things, you would not believe what that would do for somebody. I've told this story before, and it's not a long story, so I'll tell it again. Several years ago, Dana had this great idea where we ended up buying $5 Starbucks cards. A lot of you know about this. And we would look for opportunities if it was somebody who, maybe sometimes it would be a service person who was clearly having a bad day. Dana was real big about going in and saying and giving them this and telling them that they were appreciated because she thought that that would affect them and that they would need to know that then, maybe most of all. But we look for people who weren't appreciated. We look for people who don't get a thanks. And I remember one morning I showed up I had a couple of these cards in my wallet, and I showed up at school at Mossy Creek when the girls went there and we were dropping them off in Carline. And for whatever reason, I think one of the girls had a project or something I had to carry in, so we parked the car and we carried in, and there was this lady that was always out there every morning. And she would direct traffic and make sure the kids got across the street, across the little car line safe and that kind of thing. And I mean, half the time when you got up there would be some parent laying into her because they didn't appreciate the way she did something. But this lady she was quiet. She was out there all the time. She clearly cared about these kids. It was freezing. She's out there bundled up. And so I wasn't even thinking about it. I walked Chloe in, got her stuff arranged, walked back out, walked past this lady, and there had been somebody who was walking in, like kind of laying into her for something. And I walked past her. I got about halfway to the car, and I went, oh, yeah. And so I turned back around, and I get this thing out of my wallet, and I say, excuse me. I saw her. I saw her whole demeanor kind of fall as she kind of prepared herself for the next barrage she was going to get from some disgruntled parent. And I said, no. I just want you to know that I see you. I see how much you care about these kids. I see you coming out here. I see people giving you a hard time about it sometimes, but I know why you do it. I know you care about these kids, and I think you're doing a good job. And I may have seen that level of shock on somebody's face before, but not many times. And her eyes welled up with tears. And I said, I'd like you to have this, and I handed her a $5 Starbucks card. It's a cup of coffee. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she said, oh, sir, thank you. You have no idea. You have no idea how much I needed this. It was a 15-second interaction and a $5 gift card. I don't even know if she liked coffee. But it was more than that, wasn't it? And everybody who's done that kind of thing, we all have 100 stories like this. I'm not telling you anything great about me because, frankly, I almost forgot to do it. But it impressed on me how important it was for that woman to hear somebody saw her. Somebody appreciated her. So that can be one. Gratitude letter. Gratitude letter is you write a letter to a specific person and you be specific about what you're being grateful for. It doesn't have to be long. I would say maybe 250 words. And if they're alive, then you should send it to them, or you should set up a lunch or coffee date where you can actually read it to them if you think you can get through that. And if it's somebody who's passed on, who's not around anymore, I'm going to go ahead and recommend that you do it anyway. Write the letter. Maybe read it out loud after you're done. It matters. To whom for what, write down up to 5 things that you're grateful for and to whom you're grateful for each of them. Got your gratitude, catch one member of your family doing 3 good things, good or right things today, write them down or thank them personally. Little things, it's easy to take the tiny ordinary things that others do for us for granted. For one day, try to notice and say thank you. Be specific for even the smallest things that people do for you that they don't have to do. So look through those, pick the ones you like. I don't care if you do more than the same one in a week. The other thing is all of these aren't going to resonate with every one of you in the same way. There are going to be some of these that work better, that you connect with better than others, and that's fine. And they're not going to be the same as the person 3 people down from you on the row, and that's fine. Part of the reason that we do this is so that you can experiment with them and see what sticks. But I want to really reinforce this. I told you Robert Emmons did a bunch of the research on it, so it was fascinating when I was reading Brene Brown. You guys, I've mentioned Brene Brown before, right? I was reading Brene Brown, and I ran into some stuff that she said that went right hand in hand. It's fascinating because I asked him, this has been several years ago now, I asked Robert Emmons, I was like, have you seen Brene Brown's research? Because he goes, he wasn't familiar with her, so I pointed, and it was saying a lot of the same stuff. So here's what she says. She says, I never talk about gratitude and joy separately for this reason. In 12 years, I've never interviewed a single person who would describe their lives as joyful, who would describe themselves as joyous, who was not actively practicing gratitude. Then she keeps going. She says, I use the word practicing because the research participants spoke of tangible gratitude practices more than merely having an attitude of gratitude or feeling grateful. In fact, they gave specific examples of gratitude practices that included everything from keeping gratitude journals and gratitude jars to implementing family gratitude rituals. It's not just thinking you'll be more grateful. You have to actively and intentionally do things that are not necessarily natural for you to reinforce this, to build it, to cultivate it in yourself. She mentions the gratitude jars. I'll mention them real quick just because I think they're fun. A lot of people will take a jar or some kind of container, set up in a public area in their room, like in their house, like the living room or something, put a little stack of paper or notes or note cards or something beside it and a pen. And everybody in the family is just out there. When everybody in the family, when they have something they're grateful for, they just go and they write it down, fold it up, drop it in the jar. Again, it matters not one bit if anybody ever goes back and reads those. But the effect is, number one, that you take the time to notice, you take the time to document it in some way, and the whole family, as they walk through the living room or that public space, slowly sees the jar or the bowl or whatever you have fill up with the things that you're grateful for. It's a great visual, and everybody participates. Now, we got 2 more weeks to talk about this, so we're going to finish up here. In her book, Help Thanks Wow, Anne Lamott says this. She says, gratitude begins in our hearts and then dovetails into behavior. It almost always makes you willing to be of service, which is where joy resides. It means you're willing to stop being such a jerk. When you are aware of all that has been given to you in your lifetime and in the past few days, it's hard not to be humbled and pleased to give back. Here's what I guarantee you. I'm very careful with that kind of language because most of the time I'm saying, hey, everybody's a little bit different. I want you to try this and see what it does. Here's what I guarantee you. I don't know which of these practices you'll resonate with the most, but I guarantee you that if you take the time and the intentionality to put more gratitude practice in your life, to cultivate more gratitude in your life, I guarantee you there will be positive benefits in your life. The science actually says not even just psychological benefits, although those would be enough. It has benefits on your physical health, on your ability to heal from diseases. One of the things I didn't tell you is the research also says that writing letters of gratitude, I think it was 1 in a 3-month period or something like that, 1 letter of gratitude over a 3-month period had similar effects psychologically to some of the more popular antidepressants. I'm talking about in body chemistry and everything, brain chemistry and everything. And again, you do not have to take my word for this. You can look it up. It's easy to find. Actually practicing gratitude produces noticeable changes in your life. And I don't want you to approach that in a mercenary way, but I do want you to know that grateful people live better. Grateful people live healthier. Grateful people have better relationships. And I don't feel like this sentence should be a hard sell, but I'm going to say it out loud. Being grateful, being the kind of person who notices the good in the world, the good around you, the good that others and God have brought into your life and makes note of it, is a better way to live. You understand? It's a better life. And I don't think anybody wants to be ungrateful. I just think we're busy. I just think we get so busy that we don't stop and notice. We don't stop and document. And when you do that, the negative things scream at you. For whatever reason, our brains have a much easier time remembering the negative things than the positive things. And if we're not careful in our busyness, and in our thoughtlessness, we will start to believe what those negative things that we are noticing while we're not taking time to notice the positive things. We'll start to believe that this is reality when it's a distortion. I'm telling you that you are the children of God the Father living in your Father's world, and He is good, and He is living, and He is active. I'm telling you that there are blessings all around each one of us all the time. And a big part of our problem is we don't slow down enough to notice them. And so how could we ever be grateful to the good people God's put around us or to God Himself for the things that we're not bothering to notice? So, may you let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts because you are called to peace, and may you be thankful. May you allow the message of Christ to dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with gratitude in your hearts. Whatever you do or say, may you do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, giving thanks to God through Him, and may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in Him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And the church said together, amen.
Dick, announcements or closing prayer.